not just on the basic level before you because the time, but if it's still as a student, I would say okay, maybe it's just part of the experience. But for me at this point, I did that everything in my life like this, that to work every day of my life. Has just work, come back with this social. I can't even know to finish because the amount of work I have right now is so crazy because it's greater than the money I'm putting. So if I get back, I should see rest. Hello. Yeah. When I get back home, I just be some quiet. When I get to choose out, it's not so. Yeah, but so wow, wow, this is how this is. Yeah, okay, she wants to rehearse. You say that it was not that. So this looks, you said, wonderful. That's very, very good. It's very good. I don't know where it's going on. No flat out of time. The financial health and one force that side. Then I'm going to speak in this side. You know, that's the one. That's one more for never look at it. I don't know. That we did. This is what's this new to yeah, so I'm not sure. I was thinking of picking so that I didn't really want to space. Yeah, I actually already those really and they also so the short day together when I was at Paris, she was listening to me. Well, oh, sorry, she graduated last this January and she did that. And I think that she went for she was doing all of them as wanted to she I think that she was not replying to me. Anyone that shows my passport, you were there. Wait, I'm just related to Spain agents we now. Very disciplined. Some of them be higher than most money for most of them are good. Look at the rent price, the total package, 100. So pulling the whole of question and it's easy payment, but not 650. They are not calculated 200 plus in that type. So it's just crazy that I'm gonna use the rest of it. Good afternoon. On to my favorite function. For a new part of the lesson, I should have been grateful. But those, it's so, okay, all right, not to switch. And, oh, Jesus, yes. Good afternoon, yes. I'm moderating the lecture. Yeah, do you want to share something? I'm not sharing anything. It would just be good to know. Do we know whether any of the students will be physically there? I've not met anyone because I'm not a person online. Okay. Okay, so we start at 3:45. Yes. Okay, so the idea is that it's just so. In fact, I just want to go around the rooms now. So I think the room was changed. Okay. Oh, okay. What I had for the online, for the maybe for those who are doing online program. Okay. Because on yeah, on the hard copy it's 410. Okay. Okay, we have somebody online. Okay. I don't know. Okay, it's almost time actually. We have 4 minutes. Okay, so basically, anything I don't want to show on screen, I want to just right. Yes. Pain. The second person that I can see is the founder of the project, but he is not himself a panelist. Oh, yeah. So, which means we're still awaiting 2 panelists. Yes. And altogether, we have 1 hour. 1 hour, 13 minutes, 17 minutes. That's 3 + 5 to 5. Okay. Don't have so small. Okay, and it's very what you have. Yes, but I don't know if it's yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Since it's highway, basically, where am I looking at? I'm looking there, I can look this way. If anyone wants, okay, the camera. Okay, okay. So, yes. So I can
I don't We seem to be waiting for one person, but I've sent him an email. He has not responded. If it's not check. Well, Sarah is here, so.
If I get it here, can you update me, please? Is that another online? No, because he said something. I thought he was talking to us.
No, yeah, he said
Can he hear us? So in which case we're waiting for 2 people. We're waiting.
Okay.
Are we not waiting for 2 people?
There are 2 people. I'm going to try to find their phone numbers and see if I can reach them.
Okay. So, Kola, are you what is the familiarize me with the modalities of your own participation? Just to comment.
I'm not participating. I'm just interested in the conversation.
Okay,
if you need me, I'll be here.
If there's anything you can shed light on, you'll be happy to do that, right?
Yes.
And then in the discussion later.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I'm
giving. Let me try to track them down for you.
Okay. Let's hope that the joining links work or wherever they are. I'm just always watching us also. This project was started by Fola Tuboso and was supported by the Open Society Foundation and is in collaboration with archive.ng. Archive.ng, people might know, they are digitizing years and years and decades of Nigerian newspapers for easier accessibility online. So they are collaborators of this project. And a bit about the Black Orpheus Journal itself. It was founded in 1957 by the linguist Ulibaya, a name that rings up and down these lands as for his endeavors as in Ibadan, and especially in the town of Osogbo in the 1960s, and which also led to the birth of the Osogbo art movement. And he had started at Ibadan, and Black Orpheus Journal was a journal of writings by African American, and especially in this case, we would say diaspora writers, critics, artists, looking at our literature, our art, our modes of thought, and so on. It was founded in 1957, and he was the first editor. Ulibaya, that is. And it had successive editors over the years, especially after Ulibaya left Nigeria, initially in 1968. And Black Orpheus, it was in the later years in fits and stops, but it had editors including Theo Vincent, Wole Soyinka himself, Christopher Okigo, Abiola Irene, and so many others. And it eventually ceased publication in 1993, 1994, thereabouts. And after that, Black Orpheus as a journal became like looking for a zebra in the wild of Lagos. You're never going to see one. And very few people have seen or read this journal over the years, and it became a thing of memory, almost like a fable, really. And but if you're in the arts, or you're a critic, you're a scholar, you follow our literatures, you would have seen references to Black Orpheus over the years, but very few people had actually read it. And so this project, started by Kola Tudosum, himself a linguist, was to digitize the Black Orpheus Journal and to make it accessible for a new generation. And it started by purchasing now very rare copies, actual print copies, very rare, but getting those, collecting them together, and now digitizing them. And OlongoAfrica, which Kola Tudosum also heads, now has them online, and anyone can go there and basically read through, browse through, see what our scholars and writers, if you want to know what was the first book review of One Man, One Machete by T.M. I bet many people have read that in school, but perhaps never knew what the critics made of it initially at the point of publication. Now you can, because you can see the very first book review of One Man, One Machete, and so many other publications of that era, so many critical works, so many of the arts of artists that then became the leading artists over the last few generations. And so as part of this project, we called for fellows, we called for applications for the Black Orpheus Fellowship, when we had 59 applications. Out of those 59, there was a process and the panel of judges, and eventually 10 fellows were selected across a range of the arts, literature, whether it be metadata, to further expand the digitizing project, to just retrieving the archive, as it were. And some have taken this, they've approached it from many different perspectives. So 10 fellows emerged. And out of those 10 fellows, 3 are here today as participants and speakers on this panel. We have Siralaniyo, Damilola Faith Ayeni, and Ifesinachi Wadike. And they will be presenting their findings as fellows of the Black Orpheus project. So what we're going to do is that I will allow 15 minutes for each panelist to talk about their projects, what it's been like being part of the Black Orpheus, being a Black Orpheus fellow, and the progress of their work so far, and what are the illuminations that they come upon, what is the progress, what have they discovered, what has it been like, and what are the insights. And so that's how we're going to play it. And I will introduce first, and she was the first on the line. So I take it that all the speakers are joining us virtually, because I'm the only person physically here. So we'll start with Siralaniyo, who will be, let me see. Yes, her interest is in the female contributions to Black Orpheus, and her research will produce writings that explore this project in deeper detail because at the time of her application, as many of us were concerned, the women's participation in the era of Black Orpheus, it was not always at the fore. And so it's important as part of this project to also highlight and to bring to memory and to archive and to just have everything done right the way maybe some of the men have been paid attention to over the years. So I will be handing over to Sarah Lanio, and you have 15 minutes to talk about your project. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon or good evening from wherever you may be joining in from this afternoon. So my name is Sarah, and I'm one of the fellows of the Black Orpheus project. My core focus for the project has been to find the female contributors to the journal, right? And so I'm going to start before I go into my main discoveries over the course of this project. I'm going to give a bit of background. So when I initially came upon the Black Orpheus project, the call for fellows, that was probably the first time that I heard about the journal. And so I did a bit of research about what the journal was about and, if it would be something I would be interested in. And I think one of the core things that I came about during my research was an article which eventually spurred the focus of my project, which is finding women, right? And the author had said that there weren't any women on the advisory committee of the Black Orpheus Journal, which I found out to be true. And he said that apart from Susan Wenger, there weren't many female contributors, again, true. But what caught my attention was that he also said there weren't any female contributors except a few who were male authors. And I thought, that's unlikely because as I'm a historian, right? And I do a lot of research about African women in history. And one thing that you will come to find is that it's never as it seems. So a lot of times the records you find about women, you really need to go deeper than what you see on the surface, right? So this author had said that many of the female contributors to the journal had been focused on criticisms about male authors. And so I wanted to find out, is this true, first of all? Were they primarily focused on criticisms about male authors, or is there more, right? So since I started the project rather, I went through the 5 volumes of the journal that were available, provided by OlongoAfrica. And I across those 5 volumes, I have found 27 women. And this is in a pool of over 200 men. And I counted, so I'm pretty sure that there are over 200 men in, and there are over 200 authors in volume 1 alone, and women are only less than 1%, I would say, of volume 1. So across the journal, we have over 200, and I found 27 of them. And in this 27, you will find authors, right? Many of these women contributed short fiction. We have women like Flora Nwapa. We have women like Ama Ata Aido. And these are, again, popular women who if you are familiar with the literary scene in Africa, you have heard of these names. So these are women who many of their first publications were in the journal, and you have people who contributed poetry, like Eloise Lofton. We have, just a lot of others. And so that was the first thing that I found interesting, which was debunking what I had found in this journal, that women were primarily concerned with criticism. There were critics, but no more than you would have found male critics. There were also male critics, and so it's not a lopsided number, right? So talking about from absence to access, I want to say first of all that one of the things that really provides access, especially when we talk about recording and remembering women, female contributors, and not just in the Black Orpheus Journal, but across Africa, is that resources like what OlongoAfrica has provided, the Black Orpheus Journal, which are not behind paywalls, really help. So if a person who has not gotten into a fellowship like me, who has, primarily whose primary focus is to find women, you may read an article like that, and that would be it. But now we have the Black Orpheus Journal open for anyone and everyone who wants to access it, to find it. And so I want to add that. Now, in terms of my discoveries since I have started this project, I think that one thing that I have discovered is that there is the focus of women were not marginal, right? So we don't have women focusing on one particular thing. And then there is also the case of when you want to find people. So in my experience, and I've worked on this project for about 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. And in my experience, I have seen that finding women or recording the contributions of women requires a bit more legwork than you may find with men. And any historian who has done research on women will understand what I'm trying to say. In that, for example, if I wanted to find one of the contributors to the journal, say, for example, Miriam Koshland. Miriam Koshland was a translator, and she was very, she contributed severally to the Orpheus Journal, translating poems from languages, some of those languages probably now probably now extinct. And when you see a name like Miriam Koshland and you want to discover, okay, who's Miriam Koshland? The first, in today's world, the first step we take is to Google the name, right? And so I will Google the name, and it takes a lot. It's not something that just pops up. A lot of the times, these women that you come across are people that you will find on some blogs. So maybe a blog will mention their name here and there, or maybe you'll find them on Google's third page or Google's fourth page. And sometimes you have to make inferences. You have to look for context. For someone like Una McLean, who was I believe she was not even someone who was, she was not someone she was not a literary expert. So she was not a writer or a what's it called? She was not a writer or a poet or anything. Sometimes you find 3 people with the same name, and so you have to determine there are 3 people with the name Una McLean. Which one of these people could have possibly contributed to the journal, right? So what I found is that because along the line, what I had to do is Google each and every name that I came across, because it was very important that I was not just assuming that, oh, it's not probably a woman. It could be a woman, but it's not a woman. So I just had to make sure that categorically I could say this is a woman and this is a man. And so what you will find is that when you Google the name of a man, and I made it into a fun game sort of, when you Google the name of a man, the moment you see a picture, coming up, you just know that it's probably, when you Google the name of a person, rather, it's probably a man if you have enough resources to form a story about them, right? So maybe I will see a picture rolling up on Google, I'll be like, okay, this is probably a man. But for women, you have to go the extra mile. You have to, look at every iteration of the name that you come across, every variation of the name that you come across. Could this be this person? Could it be that person? Because what I found was that a lot of them were not particularly, how do I put this now? they were not in the records that you may find, they were not highlighted, right? They were not highlighted. So the ones who put in reviews, criticism, fiction, poetry, they were not highlighted. And so you have to find ways in which to tie them back to the journal, right? So I think that's something that I really found interesting. And another thing is that when we talk about access and absence, from absence to access, I think that something as simple as a name can be the difference between extinction and remembrance. And we find that in when you talk about something that the politics of memory, what do we choose to remember? What do we choose to remember about the past, about women? You find that you have to. It's not enough to say it's too difficult to find this particular person, so I have to put it aside. Women's the research about women requires a lot more legwork, requires a lot more study, requires a lot more research. And so something as simple as a name, for example, if I pick up a name like Christina Atara, and I think she wrote a fiction in the Black Orpheus Journal, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I couldn't find her. I spent a couple of hours just trying to find variations of the name, and just to ensure that I was doing a thorough research, but I couldn't find her anywhere. So, but I think that with this study, with the kind of research that we're now doing at OlongoAfrica, something as simple as her name, which is Christina Atara, provides a bit of context to who she was, even if it's just a line, even if it's just, so and so person. Christina Atara was a contributor to the Black Orpheus Journal. It helps researchers coming behind to provide context if she ever pops up somewhere else. So I think that was very important for me to do, to ensure that if you are not finding someone, if it's not easy enough to find them, do not toss them aside, because that also plays into the politics of remembrance, the politics of memory. You just have to ensure that there's a line about them, there's something about them, there's something that people can reference in future to say these are the people that contributed to the journal. So I think that those were my primary findings throughout for the past 2 months that I've been on the OlongoAfrica fellowship, and I think they've been really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Very, very insightful and fascinating. The politics of memory and remembrance, especially as it applies to women, when we're trying to trace back the involvement of women in the past in a journal such as Black Orpheus, and how we can find it, and how little details can help us provide context in future. I particularly nodded along when the speaker mentioned the fact that, well, even if you haven't been able to find a lot of information and it's just a room, record what you find anyway, because somewhere at some point in the future, that will be maybe just what is needed for someone else to be able to find the context and also to find additional that will lead them to a better place of locking down that person's contribution. So thank you very much for that. We'll go to Damilola Faith Ayeni. Is Damilola Faith Ayeni with us? No.
He's not there. I called him. He said he was trying to log in, but he's not here.
Is Ifesinati what you with us?
I'm here.
You're not here at, oh, that's wonderful.
Can you?
Are you there? Can you say that? Okay, it's flashing.
Yes.
This one is very useful, and this is on the.
Okay,
this
looks like
one.
Damilola is the one logged in under Ebonlua's name.
Yeah, this login as the whole report.
Okay, who is any of our speakers that we have online, aside from Sarah Lanyon, who's already spoken? Can you indicate, please?
Damilola, go ahead if you can hear us.
If it's not Nwajuke is not online.
Okay, can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes,
We can hear you now.
Okay. Who is that? Can you say your name, please?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Who? Can you say
Right.
who you are, please?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to. I'm not able to.
Can you say who you are so that we do not
This
have
is Damilola Ayeni.
Okay, Damilola Ayeni. Okay. So Damilola Ayeni is the next.
Okay, I'm Damilola Ayeni. This is Damilola Ayeni.
Okay, so let me just introduce you and then you can speak, please. Damilola Ayeni is one of the 10 fellows of the Black Orpheus Fellowship 2025, and will be producing a 3,000-word article addressing questions of racial diversity and the place of apartheid and other upheavals in the Black Orpheus production. And basically, this project is also tackling race, poetry, and controversy, examining a specific episode involving the poet, the South African poet, Dennis Brutus. Now I will hand over to the speaker, Damilola Ayeni. You have 15 minutes, please. You have 15 minutes, please. And if there's a radio behind you, can you please, if there's anything giving volume behind you, can it be muted, please?
All right. Nothing is making noise behind me. I just hope you can hear me.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
All right. All right.
You have 15 minutes, please.
All right. All right. So I'm glad to be here this evening. Okay, I'm glad to be here this evening, and I'm sorry I had a serious network setback, and that's why I'm not able to turn on my video now. I just hope that at some point in the course of this conversation, you'll be able to see my face. That said, I'm one of the fellows. In fact, I'm nervous now because of the challenge with network connection. So where must I begin this story? Where should I begin this story? Okay, I'll begin this way. I'll begin with in the course of this fellowship. So the first discovery was the Black Orpheus Journal itself. This was a publication that defied the colonial literary norms, and allowed African creatives to speak, and write in their own voices. The Black Orpheus on this journey. And then my second discovery, the Umbari Club. This was a place where people did not just gather to celebrate creativity, but to define African creativity on their own terms. They did it in their own terms. African creativity, they redefined it, they owned it. Writers, thinkers, painters, all of them came together to, kind of bring creative sovereignty, to say Africans are also knowledgeable. Africans can also write. Africans can also think. So it was revolutionary. Now, my third discovery, the person of Dennis Brutus. Dennis Brutus was a South African poet and anti-apartheid activist. He was, jailed at some point alongside Nelson Mandela. I learned that, his cell was not even far away from Nelson Mandela at some point. Now, what have I really gained? What has stayed with me in all of these discoveries? One thing has stayed with me in all of these discoveries, and that is that strong ideologies, when they come face to face with the messiness of real life, the ideologue looks like a hypocrite. I'm going to take that again. Strong ideologies, when they come face to face with the messiness of real life, the ideologue becomes a hypocrite. And that takes me to something Pope Francis said at some point in the past. He said, behind rigidity, there is something hidden. Most times a double life. Now I'm going to tell you this story. In 1963, Dennis Brutus was awarded the Umbari Poetry Prize by the Umbari Club, but he rejected it. He would ask me why. He rejected it because he felt the description of the prize was exclusionary. This was the description. Umbari Poetry Prize for a distinguished Black poet. Now, Dennis Brutus identified as colored, not Black. So if he felt, if you're telling me a colored person to come and take, a prize for a Black poet, you are saying my race, my colored race, does not exist. It was on this basis that Brutus rejected the prize. And I want to ask you, truly, are we all Black in Africa? We're not all Black. There are the Afro-Indians, I think you can find them in South Africa, the coloreds in South Africa, the whites who are historically tied to Africa too, in South Africa. In North Africa, you find other people who are not, Black, but are African. So a lot of people were, of this school of thought that we are not all Black, we're only all African. So describing, a prize as Black excludes, the other races on the continent. But let me, and then before I say this, we just lost Kuyo Ko. I don't know if I pronounced her name correctly. The Cameroonian Swiss art curator, who died recently. She said, and I quote, "We are all African, but we are not all Black." But let me complicate it for African. You might want to ask me why. There are the Afro-Caribbeans who are historically tied to Africa. There are the Afrikaners, the controversial Afrikaners, the whites in South Africa, who are historically tied to Africa. They do not identify as Africans. They call themselves Afrikaners. In Sudan, you have the Afro-Arabs. So African is not without its own weakness or weaknesses. Now, anyway, why do we have to name ourselves? Why go ahead and identify as individuals. I'm an individual. You're an individual. Or why not, call me by the name of my race, black. You are colored.
Are you still with
I
us?
quote, we gather together not because each person cannot see the moon, from his house. We gather because it is good for kinsmen to do so. Now, why did the Umbari Club choose the word black? You remember the same word black was, in Black Orpheus. Now, the Umbari Club was a revolutionary club. It was a place where art, politics, solidarity converged. So the choice of the word black was meant for solidarity. Now, many people could not get that. So the point is, if you argue that individual or racial specificity is good, it's a very strong ideology. I give it to you. If you argue that we should be treated or we should be a collective, because when we are a collective, when we operate under a label, we can fight, for collective, for a collective cause. We can, pursue a collective dream. We can pursue a collective goal. That is also an ideology that is reasonable. But I think that one thing I've learned in the course of this, fellowship is that we should stop being ideologues. We should rather be logical. Because you see, logic sometimes take us into the in-betweens. The world is polarized today because of ideologies. I'm black, you're white. This is what a woman should do. That is what someone else thinks. That is what a woman should do. Someone thinks, oh, it should be 50-50. Someone thinks, no, it should be 100-0. It should be 80-20. These are ideologies, and ideologies are dividing us. How about we stop, being strong ideologues and, follow the path of logic instead? Now, in the course of this fellowship, a question has kept on popping up, in my mind. Today, our challenges are no longer limited to race, to apartheid, to all of those things. Now we are in an AI era. And in this age, we talk about algorithms. If the Umbari Club were to be, to be alive today, were to be functioning today, how would it approach the subject of AI? What would it do with Africa at the moment? I think that is a data colony. That's one. Africa is also a technology colony. Why did I say that? Our data is used to feed systems abroad. For instance, let's talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT gathers, data abroad, takes money through. The data probably belongs to you. I mean, it is gathered from different places, and an African we have to pay ChatGPT. That makes us now. We're also in the sense that we are refusing to make use of our rich traditions, our literary diversity, our literature to build our own models, AI models. Now, if we do not do this, people from without will come to Africa to mine our data and then go use it elsewhere. What do we become? We become a data colony. So if the Umbari Club, the revolutionary, the radical Umbari Club were to be alive today, it would advocate for indigenous AI models, indigenous technology tools. And finally, I must say this, what exactly do we learn from Dennis Brutus's defiance? He was a bad man because on the surface, you might think that it was just a language disagreement. But if you look at it very deep, you realize that it points to something beyond that. It points to a tension, between Pan-African solidarity and racial specificity. That is what we really learn from his defiance. I think that the point remains not always is, identity simplification or broadness bad. And I can give you an example of that. I think it was Wole Soyinka who said that at some point when Dennis Brutus was shot in the back, the same Dennis Brutus was shot in the back in South Africa. He was supposed to be taken to the hospital, but the police did not take him to the hospital because the only available ambulance was for whites. Now he had to be carried to the hospital with an ambulance. The police officer had to tell him that, see, hospital. Now, Dennis Brutus could not reject this offer because his life depended on it. So that means that identity simplification is not always bad. Sometimes it saves your life. Sometimes it helps you in numerous ways. Sometimes it gives you the permission to belong. But what then do we learn from this defiance? I think that what we can learn from this literary giant's defiance is that, yes, you can identify with a larger group. You can, simplify your identity, but do not allow your uniqueness to be blurred. So identity simplification is good, if it is for a good cause. But while we're at it, while we use it for solidarity, while we use it for unity, we should not allow it to blur, our individualness, our racial specificity, our tribal specificity, our religion specificity, and all of other things that really define us as individuals. So I would stop here for now. And I say thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll go to Ifesinachi YGK. Do we have the fellow online with us?
No. Please, no.
Who would have spoken about the fellowship. Really interesting one that would look at hydro imaginaries, water as a marker of generations and ecology in Nigerian writing. And we have done this with a focus on Christopher Okigo, Okara, Gabriel Okara, J.P. Clark, and so on. He's not with us?
No.
No? Okay. Is College also online? Is anybody from OlongoAfrica able to enlighten us about the participation of that fellow? No? Okay. Well, if he's able to join us, then.
Sorry.
Yeah, please. If it's an actual work, we just want to know if he will be joining us or if he's been able to join. Hello? Why am I talking?
Sorry, what did you ask me to
If
I'm
it's
sorry,
not
my internet.
okay, I just want to know, I'm just trying to see whether he's on the line and can speak to us remotely as the
Yeah,
others are.
he's not here, unfortunately. I've tried to reach him, his phone was
He's
not
not
going
here
through.
and no one has
He
said
was-
anything. Okay, so we'll continue with the two speakers that we have. Is that okay with everyone? We'll continue with the two speakers that we have. If the third speaker, if we're so lucky that he's able to join while we still have time on this panel, then we'll put him in. But I think for now we'll just, I think what I'll do, how much time do we have left?
I don't know.
40 minutes. So I will ask some questions, and I'm hoping that questions will come from the floor and that questions will come to us from online as well. You will know when the questions come up, right? Okay, so I will just ask the questions for now. I think that I'd like to go first to Sterolani. And are you there? Research about women requires more resources and effort than if you were doing research about men. I'd just like you to, and it was very fascinating, all of the little pointers that you were able to signal for us. And what about when women get married and names change? Is this something you encountered a lot during this project, during this research, or maybe even in general?
Okay, yes. So there is that.
Is that the reason perhaps why sometimes we can't find women who have been part of projects in the past? They have become almost new people.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that is a reason why sometimes when we research women, we may not be able to find data about them as we may have found for men. But what I have found, I think that in two instances, I found cases of women who got married. So in the first instance, I was looking for someone named Christine Obumselu. And Christine Obumselu is the name that I think before she got married, her name was Christine Clinton. So after marriage, her name was Christine Obumselu, and that was the name with which she contributed to the journal. But so I was looking for Christine Obumselu, and there isn't a lot of information about this particular person online, right? But I found several variations of the same name, Christine Obumselu and Christine Clinton and Clinton Obumselu. But I think that I think the other time, the other instance was when I was researching Margaret Amosu. Again, this was the name that she changed to after she got married. But I think that what happens when you encounter situations like that is that context really matters. A lot of data about them. So, for example, when I was researching Christine Obumselu, I found another Christine Clinton. So the first thing I realized was that she was the wife of Ben Obumselu, who is a more popular, he's more popular in the literary African's literary landscape. So a lot more people know Ben Obumselu, and she was the granddaughter of Herbert Macaulay. And so those were the two major information I found about her. She was this person's granddaughter, and she was this person's wife. And so going forward, I think that one thing that really helped was context, right? So in some places, even though her name may have appeared once or twice in some other places, maybe a blog or the other, I realized that she must have attended the University of Ibadan, because her husband had attended the University of Ibadan. Not because, rather, her husband had also attended the University of Ibadan. She also attended because I saw that her name was associated with the likes of J.P. Clark, Oliver, and the likes. I think I can't remember her name now. something Ogundipe. I can't remember her first name. But yeah, so I think that was yes. So I think that was a context in which I was able to categorically say this is the person that I'm looking for. But I think that when women do get married, back to your question, we really have to look at the context. So I think something that I really fought with was, when I'm writing about these women, do I want to associate them with more popular men? Because does that water down their experience? Does that water down who they are? Right? So if you are talking about someone like Christine Obunselu, does it water down who she is by saying she's the granddaughter of Herbert Macaulay? Does it water down who she is by saying she's the wife of Ben Obunselu? But I think that in remembrance, when we talk about remembering women, especially when we bring into cognizance that you may not find a lot about them, right? You have to grasp at every bit of information that you can find to form the story that you're trying to tell, right? So you can't be particularly picky. Oh, you don't want to say that she's associated with this particular man because maybe he will overshadow her because he's more popular, right? So I think that that's something that really helped in, just ensuring that there are still stories to tell about these women. For some of them, you may find that they are associated with a particular man. For some others, even though I did not come across that, I think that it is very likely that some other people may have changed their names. But also, I think it brings us back to a point I had made earlier, that because we do not record the contributions of women when they make it, after some time passes, you begin to struggle with going back to what was done and correlating what was done with what is. So I think that was very important. But again, context really matters. So even when people change names, the context in which you find this name and the context in which you find the other name, I think it's very important in sometimes making inferences and just understanding who they are. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. You have to grasp at every bit of information you can find when you're doing these researches. And I think that's something that's very, very important for all of us to bear in mind. I'll come back to you, but I'll go to OlongoAfrica for now. I'd just like to find out, during the process of this fellowship, I'm interested in knowing how your own views, your own personal views about these matters, race, categorization, labeling, how your own views have evolved or changed during this fellowship. Is he there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, I've seen conflict, as a result of racial or tribal specificity. I've also seen conflict as a result of, identity simplification. In Nigeria, for instance, at some point, people started saying, especially after the 2023 election, people started saying, I'm Yoruba first. People started saying, I'm Igbo first. So when you're Yoruba first, it often means you explore the good in your tribe and then you ignore the bad. You then explore the bad, in other tribes and ignore the good. In this particular case, Dennis Brutus could have, thought in a different way. He could have looked at it this way. He was an anti-apartheid activist at the time, and the big goal was to dismantle apartheid, right? Now, when he was in prison, it was the Umbari Club that gave him a voice by publishing, his poetry collection, Sirens, Knuckles, and Boots. That gave him a voice. Now, that helped him to fight apartheid even while he was in prison. Now, if there had been no solidarity, if there had been no Umbari Club at the time, would that have been possible? Okay, so if everyone had identified as black.
I hate to stop. My question was about yourself. In what ways have your own views evolved? Your own personal views evolved? What were your views at the start of this fellowship? And how have those views evolved concerning these matters, concerning race, categorization, labeling, Pan-Africanism?
Yes. I was actually going to that. I was just trying to prepare the ground for that.
You have about 2 minutes to get there, please.
Okay. So, looking at all of these dynamics, even before the fellowship, I was already, telling people or thinking that there are so many things in between. There are so many things in between. I feel Africa should be one. At some point, I also felt that, well, maybe, a tribe has certain things that are superior. But, with this fellowship now, with the conflict, that I've seen in this fellowship, I've been able to come to the conclusion that neither identity specificity nor, simplification is bad. It all depends on how we approach these things. So if simplification does not erase your identity in a way that.
Okay. Can I ask about the way in which you use tribe, the word tribe, please? Can you brief for us on the word tribe? In what way are you using this word? Is it online? Okay, maybe we'll leave it. Okay. Do we have any questions from the floor? Are they back? Okay.
Okay.
I didn't direct the questions to anybody.
Okay, they're back.
I was saying that there was an earlier panel on Black Orpheus, and then I think I gathered there that OlongoAfrica can use behind the state. Able to gather about 5 or 6 issues of the journal, like the others are still searching. They are engaged with so far. So I'm just wondering what efforts is being made about, how to do about that, because I can't recall exactly how many issues Black Orpheus, you were able to take before it went into. So my question is, what effort is being made to get the other issues of the journal? Then the other thing I wanted to say is not actually a question, it's actually a remark. To commend the people behind this project. Everyone involved, the fellows, and of course, beyond the fellows, the brain behind the project itself. Collateral. So, going back, one of the major problems we have in our part of the world is the lack of resources like this, having material that go back. And then to have someone making this available without a paywall or anything, just like that, and it's more than a labor of know very well that I think he's the one behind the documentary on Wolichi that it's got there. Yeah. Just to say that we keep it up. It's wonderful what you can do.
It's online. Thank you so much for that.
I'm here. I am here, but I couldn't hear everything you said.
He had a question for you and he had a recommendation. The question is that he was at the earlier panel on Black Orpheus, the other one of the twin panels, and that he gathered that the digitization of the copies of Black Orpheus, that it's not complete, and that he wants to know what efforts are being made to get that which is still eluded project. Number one. Number two, he wanted your name, please.
Rotimi Basa.
I thought you looked familiar, but the sunglasses confused me. And secondly, he commended you massively for this project and everyone behind this project, the fellows and all the supporters, but especially yourself, and also noted that you're also the filmmaker of Employee Road, the showing film. So you can smile.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. To answer your question, yes, volume 4, we haven't found any copies of it. Volume 6 actually turned up just a few months ago, I think late last year, when Lola Shoneyin was working with the Lagos University Library, and they found this many copies of the old volume 6, volume 6 number 2 and volume 5 number 1, I think, which we hadn't seen. It looked even new. They had been locked up in somewhere far away. So we were able to buy, those copies. Volume 4 we couldn't find, and volume 6 number 1. Actually, that one, the only one you can find in the digitized version, came from the British Library. I got someone to go to the British Library and help us scan all the pages of that. We don't have a physical copy of it. That's volume 6 number 1, but we have a digital copy. So I'm still going around libraries. Any library I find that has any of these volumes we're looking for, I'm going to scan them. Usually you can't take them out, but you can at least scan them and put them on the internet. The physical copies we were able to get up on volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and then some of volume 5, and then some volume 6. And so we know that having access to it online is helpful for people who can't come to Lagos. You can access it from anywhere you want around the world, thanks to archiving. But the physical editions are also valuable in that, because of the art on the cover and inside the magazine, sometimes you need to see it to actually appreciate the work that has been done there. Digitized editions are nice for the information, but physical editions are nice to see actually the work that goes into it, because it took a lot of effort by Bayer and the rest of them to keep the magazine running. And in 10 years, they managed to publish 22 editions, which is quite an impressive feat. So thank you for your appreciation, and thank you for Ms. Wood for being our editor-in-chief, and the fellows for all their interesting essays. I've been very impressed by how much they have unearthed. Actually, one of the funding they gave us from Open Society was just to digitize and acquire the magazines. It was our own decision to make sure we invite more people to come and engage with the stuff, because I have my own curiosities, but I realized there's so many more directions that one could find, that the magazine could lead us to, and I don't want to limit it just to myself. And bringing other people to be able to do the work and do their own work in their different ways helps the ultimate purpose of the project, which is to make sure Black Orpheus gets its due as a premier African literary platform, but also continues to engage the current generation about what has gone on in the past. And I think we're approaching that thanks to the work of the fellows. Thank you very much. I don't want to take all your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions online?
No.
Okay. Any comments? Okay. I think I'll go to Sarah Lanino. At source, when we are in the process of knowledge production itself, what can we do better? Having seen what's happened over the decades, especially with regards to women's participation, women's writings, women's citation, all of that. Even as we are putting things down now and we're creating now, what can we do better to ensure that women don't fall into the cracks in the future?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. What we can do better? I think that why women fall through the cracks is that unlike men, right, who, say for example, a man publishes fiction in the Black Orpheus Journal, he goes on to publish some other thing in some other journal, and then another thing, and maybe a book along the way. And so when you try to find this man, you do some research about him, automatically you have all of this data that immediately tell you who he is or who he was. But for women, although the Black Orpheus Journal was an avenue for them to put forward their opinions, right, through fiction, poetry, criticism, reviews, I think that one thing that we can do better, just drawing from this, is ensure we have more avenues to publish their work, so that when they are then being found going forward, you have more data to tell you a full story about this woman. So, for example, I remember that I hope I'm not mistaken. I think it was Grace Ogot, and she was a Kenyan writer, and she, I think her very first, one of her very first um, publications was in the journal, and I think it was something, no, something sweetened. I can't really remember the details right now. Pardon me, but it was she had wanted to publish something before she published in the Black Orpheus Journal, right? And she wrote in an interview sometime later that she couldn't publish it because the colonial publishers who were more popular in that time. So this was this was colonial Africa, and so she was in Kenya, and so the colonial publishers didn't want to publish what she had written because they couldn't understand how a Christian African a Christian African woman was writing about spirits and witches and so wizards and stuff like that, as opposed to writing about maybe more Christian valued stories. And so they couldn't understand that, and so they refused to publish for her. And so it was after then that she eventually published in the Black Orpheus Journal, right? So I think that women need to have more avenues to put out their opinions, to put out their works. And so I know that a lot of conversations recently about DEI is coming up. People are asking, is it right? Is it not right? Should we continue to use affirmative action and whatnot? But I think that it's very, very important that we understand the background to women are now contributing. If we understand women's history, African women's history, and we understand that they need more avenues, right? So men may have this, but you may not see the same thing with women. And so they need to, if a woman publishes in the Black Orpheus Journal and she finds other avenues to publish her work, when you go back and you want to find her, you will find her. But when she just publishes in the Black Orpheus Journal and there's no other place to publish, or people are not giving her the same opportunities that she may have found with the journal, you find that she probably falls between importance.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll go to Damilola face. Yeah, just say something to us about Dennis Brutus's poetry that you may have encountered as maybe before this fellowship, but also I would imagine especially during this fellowship. And how would you say that the Barrick prize that you focus on, especially Dennis Brutus's association with the Barrick Club, with Black Orpheus, how would you say that is reflected in his subsequent poetry? We can hear you, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, please take that again.
I'm saying that you no doubt would have been interested in Dennis Butos's poetry before this project, and that no doubt one would imagine that you've also read a lot more Dennis Butos poetry during and as a result of this project, of this fellowship. And how would you say, from reading his poetry, how would you say his involvement with the Mbari Club, the Mbari Prize that he rejected, and the involvement with Black Orpheus, how would you say that is, would you say that that is reflected in his poetry at all? And if so, in what ways?
Well, okay, so I wouldn't say so. Just from reading his poems, I only discovered him in the course of this fellowship. But then I've read a couple, of poems from him. Serene's Knuckles and Boots, for which he got rejected. I've read it. It's about, the happenings in, under apartheid South Africa, how blacks were being abused here and there. So I wouldn't say, to the extent that I know at the moment that his poems actually reflect, his stand against racial
Okay, we lost
club in South Africa. He was actually instrumental in making sure South Africa did not participate in the war under apartheid at some point. So, but then he refused to be part, generally reflects, this stand.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. It would be great to get some comments from people. Comments, okay? We have a comment. Yes, please.
I just have a question. I guess, is there a plan then to publish the collected scholarship of fellows of Black Orpheus at some point?
Okay. I do know a bit of that, and maybe I should go to, since I'm just the moderator, I should go to Kola to boss. Kola, are you there?
I'm here. I didn't hear the question.
Okay, the question again, please.
So is there a plan to publish the collected scholarship of fellows on Black Orpheus at some point?
Is there, okay, good, you heard that.
Okay. Okay. I think I heard, is there a plan to publish their work, their submission? The answer is yes. We are hoping to do either a coffee table book or just a collection of the interesting writings and findings from the fellows. For instance, Sarah has done this small metadata of the women and what their work were, and they say we have been publishing essays at the moment. There are many of the fellows who are writing currently as they are working, and we're publishing in OlongoAfrica. But we do want to have a book that will live longer after the fellowship is over, that will have the summation of all the work we did through the fellowship, all the metadata we've unearthed, there are some historical things we wanted to correct. For instance, the covers, many of them were ascribed usually to Susan Wenger and Georgina Bayer, and we found that a few more were actually done by Nigerian artists. So we want to restore the attribution, and a number of other things we discovered. Like, for instance, I tried to find the Mbari Club, the house in Ibadan. That's no longer there now. It's been taken over. So there's a few trips we've done to that place to see what the place looks like now, interviewing people there, whether they remember what used to be there. And just a number of kind of reclaiming that 60s optimism and the artistic creation of that time, and putting everything together in a book, along with photos of things we've done, places we've been, and other interesting things. So yes, there will be a book, is the short answer to your question.
And he raises this point also about, one of the beauties of being able to interact with the journals all these decades down the line is the fact that you can interrogate the silences, the blind spots, the misattributions, the people intentionally or otherwise even pushed to the margins, even as a result of the politics of that era. And it's just wonderful also, many decades later, to read a journal from the late 50s, 60s, and knowing everything that we know since then. You come to, you have a picture that perhaps even readers at the time they don't have. So it's a beautiful and fuller picture, I think. Maybe Sarah can take the next question. Sarah? Okay. Yes, she's there. Yeah, and talking of silences and blind spots and margins, what role do you think critics may have played, I think? What role do you think critics may have played in what we know about the women who were published in Black Orpheus?
That's you mean critics of the journal?
Critics, yes. What do you think has been the role of critics in bringing women to the fore or relegating women to the background? Do you think that critics, scholars who have written about literary works, who have written about artists, have they paid equal attention to the women? I think that's
question. Okay. All right. So I think that one thing we may realize is that people often do not pay enough attention to the contributions of women as they may have to. And I just have to say that it's probably not intentional. So in the case of the Black Orpheus Journal, the first time I spoke, I called your attention to the very first criticism that I came across of the journal, and it was by, I think, Josh McPhee, if I'm not mistaken, and he had written that there was no advisory, there were no women on the advisory committee. Quite correct. That was correct. And then he went further to say that apart from Georgina, I think the two people who had contributed art, right? I failed to, yes, and Susan Wenger. So, and then he said most of the women did not really contribute, apart from those who were writing criticisms about men. And so I think that I want to give critics the benefit of the doubt that it's not particularly intentional when you consider that there are over 200 men and 27 women, right? So say, for example, you are going through the what's it called now? You're going through the contribution in John, and you are not particularly thinking about the contributions of women. You're just looking at it as a work of art. You will go through more men than you will women, right? And so if you're not particularly concerned with women, you will find more men inevitably than you will find women. You will read works of more men than you will women. So I think that critics often come across maybe one or two women, and then they decide that this is what women have contributed. They do not particularly give it special attention. And that may be because of negligence or because, women were so few. Women contributed, I would say, about 1% of the works that you will find in the journal, 1 or 2%. But I think that when people then look at the journal and they want to give their contributions, they want to criticize, they do find more men than they will women. And so they have more resources to talk about men than they may have for women. But because I'm looking very specifically at what women have done, it's easy for me to say, oh, we can find poetry here. So that writer, that critic who came and said, oh, women were particularly concerned with criticizing what male authors had written, it's obviously debunked, because in the same way that you will find female critics, you will find male critics. Actually, more male critics than female critics when you really consider it. So women contributed reviews, and they had fiction, they had poetry, and in the same way they had criticisms. But I think that critics really do not look at women, they do not do an in-depth study of what women contributed, and that's what we find in. It's not anything new when you consider the way we often look at the role of women in African history, or even outside of Africa. There isn't much of an in-depth study into what they do, and so we push it aside, because when you find very few women and you find a lot more men, you tend to focus more on the men. But I think that it's very important that if we're looking at the contributions to the Black Orpheus Journal, we do a more balanced study. We do an in-depth study. When you realize that there are less women and there are more men, I think it's important to look for what do the women talk about, because the things that women consider will inevitably be different from the things that men consider, you will find. So I think that definitely they did play a role in relegating women. When you say this is what women focused on, this is the only thing women focused on, and you have not actually taken a step further to actually look up for what they actually wrote about. I think that they did play a role in that, and we can do better. We can do better.
Thank you very much. We've had more women come into the room, so I'm hoping that in the last 5 minutes or so that we have, we'll get some engaging contributions. At this, people weighing in on this. I asked the question because 80s, 90s, 2000s, even until about 10 years ago, and to a certain extent still, we talk about whether more critics deal with more seriousness. Most of the critics are male anyway, and whether more attention is paid. And I think it can be proven that critics are written more about the male writers, male artists, and etc., than they have the women, or giving them that kind of seriousness. It even goes to a place like the UK, where even some of the best writers now, you would have male critics say, "Oh, this person just writes about the domestic space." But if Kingsley Amis wrote that, they would not say that it's just about the domestic space. It's a way of relegating the woman, and I think maybe to a certain extent, it's getting better. But these are the issues